Go.
Is that it?
Awesome. All right,
Cool.
now we're live. Now we're good. So what have you been up to today? You mentioned that your director had the equipment you needed. So what kind of
Yeah.
projects have you been doing?
Well, of course, I've been preparing. I mean, luckily, I recorded the album that's coming out in a couple of months. I luckily recorded it before everything hit.
Okay.
Um, so the whole year of 2020 has just been, uh, promotional stuff for the new record, lots of marketing, in-house stuff, which is good.
Hmm.
So that's been taken care of. And in the meantime, I've taken the opportunity with the time off that I never will get again to put this movie together that I've been wanting to make for a long time. I am a screenwriter. I've never worked on a feature film project before, but I've written for shorts and acted in shorts. So I thought maybe let's take a crack at doing a long, feature length film.
Yeah. How's that whole process going for you?
Well, I mean, it was going really great at the beginning, but people, once things started to look more serious, people started backing out and it got more difficult. So
Okay.
we're kind of on a hiatus right now, trying
Okay.
to reorganize ourselves. We have my director, John Johnson, has, he gets people have to get tested to come on set. He and I get tested weekly, especially because I still do travel.
Right.
Safe.
Right.
I do safely, but I still do travel with everything going on.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're still working. And I mean, I think if you're getting tested, that's about as good as you can do right now as a performing
Yeah,
artist.
but there's really like no gigs, man.
Yeah.
Even for me, like I was just really about to hit a huge stride in
Yeah. Yeah.
my career, and I'm still at the top of my, well, I'm not at the climax, but I mean top of my game. I'm still going hard, going strong, but it's even for me, there's no gigs really.
Yeah.
So
What was the gig you just did? A gig for the Birdland Club. I watched your
oh, we
performance.
watched
I
that.
loved your song. Did you write that?
No, that's a Clyde Otis song that actually Dinah Washington recorded maybe like 50 years ago.
Bitter Earth, is that what it's called?
Yeah, and it's if you listen to Dinah Washington's version, also either Aretha or Etta also did it. Aretha, I think. And it's, very different. It's like 12/8 shuffle groove with
Okay.
major key. It's a completely different song. Like I heard a minor rendition of it in the relative minor, and I thought, let's run with that and see what we can do with it. And I got together with the arranger of that for the strings and said, I want this kind of moody piano intro, and I'm hearing all this other stuff. And he put it to, of course, charted it for strings, and we got in the studio and got to do that, and it was just magic. And I told everyone, I want to record this one live. I don't want it to be strings, then Emmett goes on top of that, and then I go on top of that. I want the energy live
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
studio, because that's how everyone records these days, is like, oh, well, it's still in jazz, we record live, but most everyone records drum track, bass,
Yeah.
guitars, and
Yeah.
pianos, then stacking. And it's like, for certain genres I get it, but for jazz and other kinds of cinematic music like that, I think live is just key.
Yeah. I'll say, obviously, for classical music, we have to record stuff together, which is
Oh
great.
yeah.
But it's been this weird balancing act because I do the classical opera stuff, but lately I've been doing all the a cappella stuff. And of
Yeah,
course,
I love
that, I mean, I can't record with six of me at one time. So I have to do it very much, one
it.
part, one part, one part, one part, and same thing for the videos.
It's good that you can do both, you know.
Yeah, I think,
I'm not a recording snob in any way. I like to do it all differently.
yeah. And it is important to be versatile nowadays, with so
Yeah,
many
you're burying yourself.
mediums.
All right.
Right, right, right. So let's jump back a little bit. Can you just give a quick rundown about who you are and what you do? Now, you have a million awesome interests and projects. So maybe just like a quick highlight reel, and then we'll get into specifics as we go.
Yep. Well, my name is Veronica Swift, and I'm known as an internationally touring and recording jazz singer. But I like to use the word storyteller, whatever that means, whether you're writing a book, writing a musical, or songs, or singing, or acting. It's all storytelling. That's the real genre.
I love that. That's fantastic. And wow, what an amazing, concise, like, this is what I do.
I've been practicing that one.
This is the Sam called it the in a bar pitch. You know, you're telling someone what you do in a bar.
You have to be able to say, you know, all of our heroes, when you listen to their interviews, particularly like superstar, you know, like Gaga, Manson, you know, Sting, and all these people that are just rock stars, they can say so much in just a short sentence. They're so concise because they practice for this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And less is more. And so, yeah, I've just been like watching interviews, and I just learned that, okay, what do I want to say, and what's the mission statement, but in a way that everyone knows what I'm talking. It's not.
Yeah. I love that you said storytelling, because that really is the name of the game. Like, if you're not telling a story and you're not conveying a message, then what's the point?
Right. And the other thing is that music tastes and art change, like whether they become more or less refined. It's all, art is one of the most subjective things in this world, is the beauty of it. But the fact that it's through generations, the tastes change. And the one thing that stays constant, even before written history and written stories, is that stories were passed down orally, you know? So that's the one constant in history, is that people need to hear stories, good stories.
That's so true. And a good story can captivate anybody. And I'm sure you feel the same way for when performing an opera, that like a big part of the goal is to give the audience an escape from whatever they're doing, and they get to dive into this new world and this new reality and just be in it for a few hours.
Yeah. And that's why I like to write, you know, screenplays and musicals that have really concrete and specific settings that I can actually dive into a new universe. And then you have so much more freedom to do things that maybe you might have constrictions in reality. For example, like when I do Veronica Swift shows, you know, there's definitely like a line that I go back and forth, whether it's a reality check or whether it's escapism. I kind of like play with both concepts in my show. But when I'm writing musicals and plays and all that stuff, I really do like the escapism aspect of storytelling.
So where do you find the time for all these hobbies? We're similar in the fact that we're juggling a lot of different things at once. And people often ask me, like, how much do I sleep? And like, how do I fit this in when I'm, you know, learning a 500-page opera or whatever it is? So what does your daily schedule look like? Do you work on a little bit of something each day, or do you just dive in hard and then finish that and then move on to the next thing?
Well, both of those really. It just really depends on, you know, I've spent my life developing my craft and I still work on it. But when you're on, well, let's say in terms of normal life, obviously this last year has not been a normal everyday life for me.
Right.
I don't really have this much time that I don't know what to do with it. But let's just talk in terms of like normal life when I'm touring 300 days a year, and I don't even have time to like people in the jazz world touring as much as we do. We don't even have time to practice, and finding time to practice is just is hard enough. And so really, like all that, I had to really do my job when I was young, learning tunes and developing good technique, because it's now served me in my career, where I really just, when I do work on it, it's developing something new, or kind of just, you know, house cleaning, you know, it's not like, so really the time to do all this other stuff, like write music or develop arrangements for future albums, etc. I kind of found that I was doing that on the planes, long flights, not like a 2-hour plane ride, but like when I flew to Australia, and then I went to Japan and China, and then I went to Europe, and then flew back, and I was going all over the place. I was finally, like, I'd have a few glasses of wine or something, and I would just get to work and write and write and write, because I was kind of forced to be in one place. There's literally no outside world around me. I'm up in the air. So that was the best place where I was most productive with this other stuff.
That's really interesting. I've never thought of planes as being like a study hall for creative work.
Exactly, a study hall. Yeah.
A study hall, yeah. I've used them before. I mean, for learning operas, especially the long flights. For me, that's, you know, Virginia to LA. For you, it's much longer. But it was if you could just say, you know what, I'm not going to watch a movie. I'm just going to grind on this plane.
Yeah.
Then you've got, you know, 6 hours or more where you can put in a ton of work and make a ton of progress.
Oh yeah. And those flights to China, Japan, Australia, it was like 14, 15, 16 hours up there. And then there's been so many flights where I literally didn't even get up to use the bathroom because I was so I was so enthralled by what I was doing. And honestly, like you should get some sleep, because actually I would say the jet lag's easier to handle when you go for me personally, the jet lag is so much easier to handle when you go to Asia or Australia, across the globe, rather than Europe. It's just close enough, but Europe is hard, like, because it's like 5 or 6 hours. It's like some days you're like, some hours you feel completely fine, and then some hours you're like,
yeah.
know? But when you're in China, you're like, well, this is so out of whack. I have to get, you know.
Yeah. My method for jet lag was always just to stay up until the next bedtime. Like basically skip a bedtime and then just crash at some point.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier Lady Gaga and Sting and these legendary figures, and you have gone through a number of periods when you really are into an artist and you take a lot from them, like Michael Jackson.
We all are like that.
We're all like that, exactly. And I'm wondering if...
But I remember you saw those phases, so...
I did. Yes, spoilers, Veronica and I have known each other since 6th grade, so I've seen all the phases. I'm wondering if you have taken things from all those phases and still incorporate them in what you do now.
In some ways, it is cognitive, like I'm very aware of it. In some ways, it's kind of in my subconscious of how the influence is creeping in. Of course, what drew me to artists like it's different artists for different reasons. It's, you know, what drew me to artists like Gaga, Michael Jackson, Marilyn Manson, Queen was the extravagance and the majesty and the theater, and everything was so everything was symbolism, and, you know, let's be as extreme as we can, which is why I love opera too. It can be like that.
Yeah.
And then why I love people like Sting or even like jazz artists. I put him in a category as jazz in the way that I mean the subtleties, everything.
Okay.
Now less is more. And I'm learning from kind of both schools, and what I've taken from at least musically from I take a lot from Queen. And of course I also take from classical music, which is where Queen took from, you know.
Right.
What I love about music, and people do this in jazz especially, but some people forget to do this with pop musicians and rock and roll, is listen to who was influencing who. So you take your, let's say with jazz singing, because that's what people know me as, you say, everyone loves Ella Fitzgerald, and that's a given. She's the first lady of swing. But then I ask kids or young people, I say, okay, who was Ella Fitzgerald listening to when she was your age? And they can never answer the question. And I say, okay, well, besides instrumentalists, you know, let's say Connie Boswell. And she was this white girl from New Orleans, you know, but, you know, it was in the Boswell sisters. So, and then I was like, okay, cool, I see that. And then you say, okay, who is Connie listening to? And that's what I love to do, is trace back to the source.
That's really interesting. Yeah, it's really important to know kind of where your heroes, who the heroes of your heroes were, and so on. And
then they become your heroes too.
Yeah. And it's not like the influence just comes out of thin air. I mean, you get it from artists that you're inspired by a lot of the time.
And that's what people like you and I have to stand for. You know, when young people listen to us and start saying, oh, I've been listening, like I get a lot of young singers who say, I've been listening to your record and this solo and this and that. And I'm like, great. Well, you should listen to Stan Getz and Lester Young and Louis Armstrong. You should be listening to that, because that's the real.
Right.
But yeah, we have to be a beacon of influence in that way.
Yeah, I totally feel that. I'm in this Discord group with tons and tons of young bass singers, mostly. Not all basses, but mostly. There's probably 900 or 1,000 of them now. And I'm a mentor to them. So in the group, I am both an ambassador. So like they, you know, if I have a new cover or something, they'll go listen to it and support it. But also like when they have questions about singing, I'm there to like answer their questions and kind of guide them. And, you know, a lot of them are interested in a cappella. A lot of them are interested in classical. And it's it's cool to be able to be there and kind of guide them and be like, this is who I'm inspired by in the opera world. So this is who you guys should go check out and see what you think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just serve as that guidance. So tell me about what's your, I don't want to ask you your favorite gig, but where's a place that you have really loved performing?
Well, this last year, the first one that comes to mind, I really couldn't answer that question, but
Right.
before COVID, I couldn't answer that question because I was just gigging so much, and I was just like, not that it all seems like the same thing, but it is like going to the office. It's just, that's what I do. And I don't really think, I take certain experiences away from me, but it doesn't necessarily mean it has to do with the gig. But I will say, because of COVID, there was I had pretty much only three live gigs last year after it hit. And one of them was probably the most influential gig that I'll ever have in my life. Well, I say that every time something like the Wynton Marsalis gig was like one of the most inspiring gigs to me, but for different reasons. In terms of what you're talking about, I would say Florence last year. I was in Florence in August, and it was like one of the only gigs happening, especially to this caliber. I mean, it's like 3,000, 2,000 people in the Boboli Gardens. But this year they, since still had 25% capacity, so they had like 500 people, which is still a lot. So we were really lucky to, we had multimedia production, huge staged 80-piece orchestra. I was dancing and singing opera and singing jazz and doing all the things that I want to do and I don't get to do often just because I haven't had the time to develop it. But this show really gave me kind of a way to showcase all this other stuff that I do. And I was playing with some of the most talented opera singers, jazz singers, musicians, conductors. And there was the guy who was there, Sam. We danced together. We were dancing, and it was like Hollywood, MGM 1940.
It sounds like a perfect gig for you, especially.
That was probably one of the best gigs of my life.
Yeah.
Especially because it's like, so that's like the only thing going on like that in that whole year, probably.
Yeah. And I bet that gig was as special for everyone else too. Just being there and getting to be immersed in it when, not many people are being immersed in live music. Starving for it. Exactly. I'm hoping when things open up that there's going to be people just chomping at the bit to go see shows. I think that'll be the case. I really think that'll be the case.
Will be. There's going to be also lots of people that are afraid to go out, and we just have to make do, man.
Yep.
That's the only thing that's worse than the actual lockdown for me is going to be the aftermath of people being afraid. Like, you have to be safe, but you can't live in fear.
Right.
Take calculated risks.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're like our age or whatever, if you're
right. Depending on the health, it does make a difference for sure. So did you say you just released an album or you're about to release an album?
March 19th.
March 19th.
Yes,
all right. Tell me about this album.
Look
at that smile.
No, I'm not used to talking about myself so much.
I know, it feels weird, doesn't it?
Weird. Yeah.
You're doing a great job.
This is the second release on this record. I'm on Mack Avenue Records. It's one of the top jazz labels in the world, and they take very good care of their artists. And this is my second release of 4 with them. And I knew, something told me about 6 years ago that I would do this record second. That was when the Me Too movement started to be a thing, and fake news was a thing, and all this other stuff. I started seeing a pattern, like, okay, we're going down a pretty dark hole here coming up. So I'm going to do these songs. There's songs on there that are like Prisoner of Love, As Long as He Needs Me from Oliver, the Crystal song, He Hit Me, and it felt like a kiss that was written. Oops, sorry. There it is.
Welcome
sorry.
back.
Yes, the song, Carole King wrote the lyrics, and He Hit Me, and it felt like a kiss. That's from like 1962. So I do some songs about abuse, and I do songs about the Sports Page by Dave Frishberg, which is about fake news. And there's a few of the singles that have been released, so you can listen to them. It's
Okay.
The album is called This Bitter Earth.
Oh,
which is the name of one of the singles.
Yeah. So is it all covers and your arrangements of pieces, or is there some original?
Yeah. I mean, in jazz, I mean, like in jazz music, we all do what I guess covers is what they're called too, but we say standards.
Yeah.
And on my last record, I did a lot more standards because your first project that comes out, you know generally want to include a lot of American songbook, but I didn't want to be branded as an American songbook singer because I am also bebop, just within the umbrella of jazz. Even I do bebop, I'm doing contemporary jazz and all this other, there's even a rock song that I arranged for like modern jazz quintet sound. So yeah, there's the Dresden Dolls, by the way.
I don't know.
No, they're a rock band.
Okay.
90s, 2000s. There's a Dresden Dolls song on there. And of course the Crystals, which is 60s pop. But I do it like kind of singer-songwriter bossa nova, just me and guitar. So there's a lot of, sounds that actually work together in a sonically cohesive way. It works somehow. But then there's also, of course, songs from Oliver and The King and I and Prisoner of Love is on there. We have the standards as well. South Pacific song on there.
Oh, great. So did you pick more to have the cohesion in the sound or to fit the themes, or did you make sure that all of those things were lining up?
Well, whenever I do a project or a show or anything, I think it's like when you write a story, it's like I always write title first. I want to know the theme. Whenever I'm singing on someone's project, I say, what is the album's theme? I need the context at the core, and then everything just blossoms from there. So I knew I wanted to make a record. Like the first one was a personal narrative, and this one was really just like a modern, commentary on modern issues. Not taking an opinion, because my wish is not to alienate my audience, but to just like present it in a
Yeah.
And so I wanted to do that with this album. And I was thinking about all the issues that kind of, plague the world. And I found songs, like, because I listened to so much music, that's the thing. Like people say, how do you find these songs? You listen. It's plain and simple. There's no secret. You just got to listen and listen and listen. And
yeah.
You find songs and you dig deeper into someone's repertoire, like Dave Frischberg. And the sports page was a bootlegged, unreleased kind of thing that I found. And no one does that song. And only Frischberg fans know of it. And then, of course, now I also recorded something of his other stuff. And those are everyone's favorite songs. And now they know who Dave Frischberg is, So I'm glad that I can shed light on these composers that people seem to have forgotten about.
Yeah.
And definitely. He's still alive too.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I'm super, super excited to hear. I'll check out the singles. You said there's some already up on iTunes and Spotify.
That's right. Yeah.
Fantastic. So, what are all your roles in this album? Because I know you like to be very, very involved in these projects because you have so many thoughts and everything is so thought out and thoughtful. So obviously you are singing and helping with artistic direction and stuff like that. But what all do you do in a project like this?
Well, I think I'm a little more hands-on in like my rock and roll stuff and the other projects that aren't jazz related, just because my jazz, like, I have producers that are there. I have arrangers on site. I have the videographer. So there's actually lots of people really, taking care of the project. So I don't have to do as much. I get to take a step back and just observe. But on this project, I was arranger. And except for, I didn't do the string arrangements as Steven, but yeah, arranger. I'm, like you said, artistic director, singer. I do some kind of, I do the production with the producers as well. We have a rapport. But because there's just, everyone's got a role, I kind of get to take a step back on these projects. Sometimes I get to do originals as well. I like to keep them more in my back pocket for a project that I want to do with all originals. So waiting to do that.
Okay. So you have not yet done an album of full originals. That's somewhere
No.
down the line.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when I'm going to do an album of like this musical that I'm writing.
Okay. Excellent. Ah, I'm so excited for you. So you grew up with two very talented and successful jazz musicians as parents. What was that like, and what was your childhood like being so immersed in music and especially jazz all the time?
Well, I mean, a lot of times in interviews, people say, "Oh, that must have been so cool. That must have been this. That must have been that." And I'm like, that's just the way it was. It's not like you think much about it. Like, do you think about the fact that you grew up speaking English as being so cool? And so it's just the way it is,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was meeting people, like, it didn't hit me until I was maybe 16 or 17 that the gravity of the people that I was growing up around, people like Bob Duro and John Hendricks and Annie Ross. And I didn't realize the gravity of meeting them until much later. So basically I still went to school and stuff, but on weekends or sometimes I'd be away for a long weekend or in the summer, I grew up going on tour with mom and dad. And I was growing up, I'm an only child. So I was in green rooms, sitting backstage while they performed and hearing this music. It was just kind of going in, and I was, I might be drawing house plans for fun or something, or writing stories backstage, but the music's going in there. I like to tell people on stage, I was the 10-year-old sitting at the bar with the Shirley Temple in a coloring.
I can see that.
That was me. I was just always around jazz clubs and festivals, but always around a lot of older people. So part of me kind of grew up very mature in a lot of ways. And then other ways I've kept my childlike personality because I've had to entertain myself with imagination, being a child.
Yeah. So growing up in that environment, maybe you just kind of answered this question too, but was it ever a thought about what you do for a career, or did you just kind of keep, you were involved in music and you just kept being involved in music, and then you ended up, doing it as a career?
Do you watch The Crown?
I have not seen The Crown.
Oh, you haven't, but you can imagine. So, like,
I've heard it's great though.
Just think about like when you grow up and you're like next in line for the throne kind of thing.
Yeah,
like you grow up knowing you have to fill that role someday, and that weight of that duty falls on you. So that's kind of what it's comparable to. I never really wanted to be a jazz singer.
Really?
And people get so mad when I say that, because I've been blessed with a very successful career early on and this and that. But it's just because that's the way my life has been. It's been dictated in that way. And I see it as I owe something to, whether it's God or to this music or to my parents. I owe something to do that. I owe it to somebody to fill the role that has been placed before me. Yeah. And if I get to do that and do the other stuff that I like, then to me, that's a successful career.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I assume though you do still enjoy performing, and you enjoy.
No, of course I do. Yeah. I just mean like it wasn't like a light bulb one day and said, I want to do this, you know.
Right.
It was never like that.
The path just kind of fell out and you walked it.
Yeah.
But all these other interests, I mean, I'm trying to just think, do you know where these other interests stemmed from? Like your desire to be a filmmaker? And is it just all about the storytelling again? Just telling stories in different ways?
I'm obsessed with stories, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was a kid. I was on the farm, 250-acre cow farm, all alone. And I was, just roaming the fields. And I had to come up with I came up with the most, to me, I was just coming up with little stories and imaginary friends and this and that. But then I would tell my mother, and she would just look at me and say, stop, this is getting too complicated. Because the stories were so like Shakespearean and the plots were intertwining. And I had, all this in my head. And for me, that was kind of the first time I realized, okay, I have an affinity for something. That's, I'm onto something here. So if I can explore that as many ways as I can, that's.
Yeah. So what are some longer term goals from you, if you've thought about it?
I want to, I want to be known as, you know, kind of when you think of people like Lady Gaga, I mean, yes, you think of her as a musician, but she, you know, she's an actress and this and that. You know, a lot of my heroes are Barbra Streisand, same thing. She's actress, singer, songwriter, and all these things. And I kind of just want the name Veronica Swift or whatever to be the artistry.
Yeah.
You know, that's the long-term goal for me. So it's like 2 months on the road doing jazz festivals, and then I take 2 months and I'm on set, you know, on site for this film I'm working on, and then I'll do 2 months on Broadway, and then who knows?
Yeah.
That's kind of the long-term goal in terms of how I want my life to be structured.
I think you're headed down the right path for that.
Hopefully.
And do you see yourself as more of an actress or a director, or totally just a mix? Just some projects you want to act, some projects you want to direct?
Oh, I mean, some projects I definitely just want to be the actress, you know. Some it's really nice, like when I do this with singing and I'm on someone else's gig and I don't have to be the ringleader. It's really nice to just do what you're told sometimes, because I'm so used to having command over everything, and it's really nice to take the back seat for once. It takes a lot of pressure off, and it's relaxing, actually.
Yeah.
So I would like to, you know, I'm sure I won't have the chance to direct anything major, so that takes a little pressure off. If I just can direct like local theater productions or little indie films, stuff like that, and then work on acting more feature, you know, major stuff, that would be kind of, I guess, something that's feasible for me.
Right. Something we both face in our fields. Now, me, not yet, because I'm just at AVA for the next few years. But when I will be a traveling opera singer, solitude and loneliness on the road is something that all opera singers talk about and that we've talked about before. And I'm wondering if you've had any revelations about that during, because you've done so much traveling and you've spent probably so much time just alone with your thoughts in a hotel room here and a hotel room there. And I'm wondering how your perspective on it maybe has changed over the last 4 or 5 years.
Well, you opera singers, you really can't afford to go out and party.
That's true.
That's the thing. I'm a vocalist. I have to pick and choose, but I still think, I mean, you know, when I say party, I mean going to a jazz club until 4 a.m. You know, and then catching the 7 a.m. flight, 3 hours of sleep. But I think that there's a lot more leniency. Yes.
We're not English majors. We're musicians.
They don't pay me they don't pay me at all, as a matter of fact. No, I'm just kidding. I think as a jazz singer, I have a lot more. I mean, I definitely take care of my voice, but I think it's a lot more lenience with, you know, the care of my instrument. You guys have to be rigorous with your care. I mean,
that is true. Yeah, if you're not functioning full, it can get pretty risky out there.
Yeah, you can fake it in jazz, you know.
Right.
But the thing about loneliness is that, I mean, you guys really aren't traveling with a band, are you?
No.
No. See, that's the thing that, I mean, every now and then I travel and then I'm alone and then I'm with the orchestra. But even then I like to get to know the orchestra and say, hey, let's go out for a couple drinks, you guys, you know. But I'm always traveling with my band, my people. It's my family, my brothers. So if I do get lonely, I just knock on Emmett's door and say, hey, do you want to play a game? Something stupid. And that's the other thing, like dating people is really, you have to really have somebody that understands whether they are in it or not, like someone who really supports, because even if they say they do, it comes out in other ways and creates problems in your relationships. That's the most difficult part.
Right. That's a really tough thing, because I guess the choice is either you just understand that your significant other is going to be gone all the time, or you go with them, which has its own set of difficulties.
Right.
Have you experienced both throughout your time?
Oh, I've dated all kinds of people, and I think that's kind of the way I wanted it to be in the beginning, because I wanted to, you know, be with someone who wasn't a musician. I wanted to be with someone who was an artist but not a musician. I want to be with someone who travels a lot. Maybe they're artistically inclined. All different kinds of walks of life and all kinds of people. And I've also been with lots of people, different parts of the world, like Australians, Europeans, all different countries. And that has taught me a lot. That way you really just know what you're looking for and know what you want. It's not being, floozy. It's narrowing it down so you know exactly what kind of person you need.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, you have to date people to figure out what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, not everyone's lucky enough to like find the right person firsthand like that.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. I know plenty of opera singers who, got married young and they were married through their whole career.
Yeah, that seems to be very, very like popular.
It is surprisingly popular.
I'm getting a drink.
Yeah, no problem.
It seems to be very popular.
It does, and it's hard for me to imagine. I mean, marriage. I feel no pressure for marriage anytime soon, which is great. Maybe because of my field, but for instance, my voice teacher at USC, Rod Gilfrey, who was on the podcast a couple weeks ago.
I know, I saw.
Man, he's fantastic. But he was married with children when he was like 20. And then had this huge,
like that too.
Yeah. Then he had this huge international opera career, and their method was the whole family would go with him. If he was over in Switzerland or Austria, the whole family would go with him, which is something I can't imagine, but it worked out well.
But that's how I grew up,
Yeah. Exactly.
And I mean, I turned out all right.
You did turn out all right, didn't you?
I hope so. Pete, we're going to be just fine.
I think we're going to be just fine. I think we are. Do you think you learned anything that has helped your career from school or an educational setting?
Well, yes. I'm saying you go into school thinking you're going to learn X, Y, and Z, and actually the stuff that you take away with you in school is none of that. I mean, you use tools that you pick up, but the stuff I'm talking about, what you learn from school, not the tools like the skill set and all that, but the stuff that really has an impact on your life, at least for me personally, was stuff like time management and patience and just finishing something to the end. Something so big like school, like college. There were so many times I really just wanted to get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
And especially because I knew where I was headed. It was so close, and I was gigging in New York, and I could see the apple, right? And I was like, I could just grab it. If I could just get out of school now, I know I could go grab the apple, but it may not have been ripe yet. I had a lot of things to develop artistically too, things that I was working out. Emotionally, like my dad's passing and the house burning down. I mean, lots of dramatic, shit happened to me.
Yeah. You can cuss. I put the little E on iTunes so you can actually say cuss words if you need to.
But yeah, lots of dramatic stuff happened to me, and including, I was having trouble in my program too. But I, figured out a way to make amends and just find a way to make it work and get through and finish.
Yeah.
That taught me everything I needed in life. Yeah.
Did you get to experience much of Miami while living there for school? I feel like I
mean the city or
yeah. I feel like I didn't really because I was only there freshman, sophomore year.
Well, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you and I were only there for 2 years. Well, I experienced the parts that I did go clubbing here and there, but then I kind of got over that pretty fast. And then I thought, I want to do this. There's a strong metal scene here, and Marilyn Manson's from here, and I'm really digging into that for some reason. So I'm going to follow that. So actually, for like 2.5 years, I really got into Southern Florida, like rock and roll. So when it comes to Miami rock and roll and Miami metal, I didn't really dig the beach lifestyle. I like going to the beach but I like it as a vacation, The lifestyle wasn't for me, and the club life wasn't for me, and I appreciate like salsa music and salsa dancing and that culture, but it just wasn't like my lifestyle. Rock and roll was the lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah.
There wasn't much of a jazz scene either. It kind of dwindled through the years too. So I didn't have that either. And that was another one reason for my frustrations. Miami had a lot of jazz clubs at one point, and a lot of them closed down whilst I was in my studies down there, which was
really,
yeah. Like
I did not know that.
The Van Dyke was an awesome club that Mom and Dad and I played at my first year. That closed down. PAX closed down. Lots of places, but there are a couple clubs that they're trying to keep them open, like Ball and Chain and Le Chat Noir. There's a few.
So were you at that time, were you thinking your career was going to shift away from jazz, since it seemed like Miami wasn't the hub for it and rock and roll was so hot?
I knew where I was going. I just knew that I needed the departure to come back. I needed to learn something from rock and roll and opera, like the theater and the drama and the edginess and the extremities of emotion, that I wasn't really getting, because I was around, when you're in an academic atmosphere, you really have to remind yourself why people play this music, particularly jazz. But you see it in classical too, where it's like everyone studies everything all the time.
Yeah.
It's like it can get a little bit like that.
100%. Yeah, especially in classical, I promise.
Right. And so you really have to make that conscious, and and you have teachers like Shelley Berg that give you that, that energy and emotional energy that you need to do this music. And so I was really glad to have him guiding me. And so, yeah, I just I needed the departure to come back stronger and more centered.
Yeah. I had Shelley Berg for my, what was it, freshman year? What do they call it?
I know.
It wasn't ear training. They had some, fancy freshman name for it. I could tell. I mean, I knew he was incredibly talented, and I was always amazed when he would demonstrate things for us. But it was never enough for me to be like, it was never enough to like inspire me to like work on my ear training. Like I really was just like, music school is overwhelming. And I eventually found it, of course, and dove in deep. But when I was at Miami, I mean, like, even though I was in the music school, it was like the last thing on my mind. And I feel a little bad about that.
No, that's your journey, and you've come back. Your departure then allowed you to come back stronger. You know what I mean?
That is something, actually. Not burning out too soon. I know plenty of singers that have, were taking classical voice lessons from the time they're 13. And, by the time they're done with undergrad, they're like, I'm so over this.
Yeah. Oops, I'm sorry. My battery keeps telling me it's...
That's okay. We only have another, 5-10 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, but we know so many singers that and I know so many singers and instrumentalists that went at it so many years and got the doctoral thing and this and that, and then they don't even do anything with music at all.
Yeah.
They're just like, I'm done.
Right.
That's a shame to me.
I don't
want people to be turned away from music because of music school, but I didn't have that experience though. I'm lucky to say that it did not turn me away from. I had a okay head on my shoulders in terms of what my goals were and what I'm taking from this, and I just need to, take the good parts with me and just look away from the bad parts.
Yeah. And you went to Miami for jazz.
I did.
Correct? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I got.
You were already, in my opinion, outstanding as a jazz singer and artist when you got to school, as opposed to me going to Miami for classical voice when I had sung one art song. But
actually in the jazz programs, especially with singers, I mean, think about the jazz vocal programs. I mean, granted, there are a few high schools out there that really do focus on jazz repertoire and get the students prepared, but really we're looking at jazz programs are filled with singers straight out of high school that did theater, they were pop singers, or they did classical, none of which have much to do with jazz.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, there's some relations, but really pop theater and classical are completely different in their technique and their approach, and even the rhythm, in jazz, rhythm is everything.
Yes.
Even above tone, which is not like the other genres, In jazz music, I would argue that rhythm is is the king.
Oh man, you've got to have such rhythm. That there are a lot of things that amaze me when I watch good jazz musicians, but just the counting, just knowing, literally just knowing where you are in a song, to me was always amazing. Whenever we performed together, when I would just be like looking over at you like, you gonna tell me when to come in, because I have no idea what's happening. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, this reminds me of a funny joke my dad used to tell. My dad, his humor was very hard.
I loved it. I loved every second of it.
He would do things like, he would be like, we would stand in the corner of a room, not say anything, and then he would go, let's say you and I are learning a tune that's like in 5/4, it's some odd meter thing, and he stands in the corner and goes, I can play 5/4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1.
I loved Todd because he was so quiet so much of the time, but he would just crack a joke under his breath. But if you were near him, you'd hear it, and it'd be hilarious every time.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3. Cool, Dad.
That's great. That's really great.
Yeah, look.
Yes. Oh, what a great man.
Yeah.
What a great man. Here's a random one. Did you ever go to Key Biscayne and hang out in Miami?
Yes, I did. A couple times, yeah.
That was my favorite place.
Yeah, it was calm.
Way better than South Beach,
Yeah. No, Key Biscayne is where you go when you're hungover and you want to just chill out for like a day.
It was fantastic. It was never crowded. You could just camp out under the palm trees.
There was always a family grilling things and having a birthday party and really loud salsa music. It was awesome.
It was such good energy.
I know. Key Biscayne was good. And
Key Biscayne was good.
Key Largo, Isla Morada too. The Keys down there.
Yeah. So you've lived a ton in cities, and you've obviously lived a ton in the country as well. Do you have a preference, or do you I'm sure you like different aspects about both of them?
Well, I go to New York to work. I mean, I always knew I was going to live in New York. Then I lived there for almost 2 years, and I just said, I can't do it. I need mountains.
Mm-hmm.
I need to just excuse my rashness, but I need to be able to kind of just be in my underwear or whatever and just open up the screen door and go,
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I don't, and New York is congested. And the best parts of New York now in this time are not there.
Right.
You can go out and hear live music on the street and it's freezing. It'll be good when the summer is here, but it's just the reasons why we love New York are the clubs, the night scene, the live music and theater and Broadway and this kind of competitive environment that is not there anymore. And it's a disaster. And so I guess what I would like to do is to have a house in the mountains, hour and a half, 2 hours outside of New York. Because they have the Catskills, the Poconos, whatever, maybe the Adirondacks, who knows. And then I'd want a drive from the city.
I feel pretty much exactly the same.
I know. I mean, you're a mountain boy too.
I'm a mountain boy, country boy for sure. And I mean, the nature of the opera world is that you have to be in cities for opera houses.
Yep.
That's the deal. So, yeah, I mean, really the only way I want to live in New York is if I'm singing at the Met. The ultimate goal for every opera singer. But otherwise, I'm just I'm happy being on my mountain,
Yeah.
I did like living in Southern California. There was something nice, at least where I lived in downtown Los Angeles, where you could walk to things.
Yeah.
The annoying thing about LA is it's a driving city. But if you live in a way where you can, I could walk to campus and I could walk to the grocery store and I could walk to the gym and take a metro to the beach, that was wonderful. So I never really dealt with the traffic, which is the worst thing about LA.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always liked LA too. I have a lot of my, my management and my record label are based out there. So when things open up again, I plan on making more trips out there as well.
Okay, before we go, nuggets of wisdom you would have for people, I would say young jazz singers especially.
Well, I have 2 nuggets of wisdom. One is for everybody young. Invest.
Okay, good.
Invest. I mean, like, once you have a sizable amount of money, whether it's from a family, trust, I don't care, invest.
That's really smart.
Especially now that there's really no gigs right now. It seems like, I know there will be a future. You just have to hang on, but it seems like there's nothing right now. And I am hanging on by a thread because of my investments. And thank God for that, because otherwise I would have to move out of this lovely home and sell all my furniture and move back in with my mom. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I'm lucky I'm financing this car, which is, my credit's going up. You got to think about these things.
Yeah.
And luckily my mother was an investment banker on Wall Street before she was a jazz singer. So she has the concepts of how to save and make money from money just sitting. You don't want it just sitting there. So anyway, that is Veronica's advice for everybody. Everybody in the world, invest when you're young. Yeah. I've seen some people like really play, like, because I told them they didn't know, and then they started to understand trading futures and playing the stock market, and now they're doing better than I am. It's like dang, now you give me some advice. Like, do I get royalties? And in terms of advice for young singers or jazz singers, I mean, really listen. Like, you can never do enough listening. There's really no secret to any of this except just listen to as much music as you can get your hands on, and you can get your hands on everything. It's all out there. And like, that's one of the biggest questions that comes to mind is, what should I listen to? And I mean, you just listen to who you like to listen to, and do what I said, like, trace it back to the source. And that opens up an entirely new world of understanding of this music and of whatever music you want to do. Yeah. Whatever genre. Doesn't just apply to jazz. All singers, and also, like, really kind of learn an instrument, learn a horn instrument for, like, articulation when you're scatting, or also learn piano or guitar so you can understand. I like the piano because I can see the orchestra right before me. It's like, orchestration. You can understand theory better and all that, what you're hearing. Then you can kind of put it to something tactile. Yeah. Yeah. So really, that's something that a lot of singers, a lot of schools put singers in music theory classes with instrumentalists. That's a big mistake, I think. It's a completely different discipline. So I love that advice. Listen. Yeah. Oh gosh, people could never. Even me, like, I'm not listening to enough music, and also, like, listen with people, because then you'll learn new stuff. People who know your taste and can introduce you to something new, and vice versa. Yeah. Listen communally. Okay. Great. Oh, Veronica, this has been so fun. I just want to give you a big hug. Me. Oh. Lucy. You're so. Hey, do you want to get lunch or something this week? Yes, let's get lunch. Let's do something. You're so incredibly talented. You too. And thank you. It's just, I'm rarely impressed by singers now, as you can imagine, because I listen to great singers, and a lot of my colleagues are great singers, and I'm always impressed when I hear you sing. I really am. There's so much control and nuance and detail. And it's fantastic, and I love you, and this was fun. And thank you for coming on my podcast. You're so welcome. Yeah. Bye. Bye.